This interview is made possible by the VIEWConference,
the biggest computer graphics conference in Italy. This year, our dates are from the 17th to the 22nd of October. And for details about the conference and tickets, please visit the website viewconference.it.
Hi, everybody. My name is Marilena Gutierrez. I am the director of the VIEWConference here in Italy, and I will be your host for today's interview, which is part of the Living Legends series. Today, we are incredibly fortunate to have with us Pete Docter, who is an animation legend, and more recently, the director of Soul. Hey, Pete. Thank you for being here with us.
It's fun to be here. Thanks for having me.
Can you tell me why you decided to pursue a career in animation?
I guess I just became fascinated by movement. You know, it was not so much the drawing as it was like discovering flip books as a kid and looking like, whoa, it looks like it's moving and alive, and the characters are real. They go through processes of thinking, and that's amazing to me. And I've always struggled a little bit with the drawing, so going to the computer was pretty comfortable, but it is all the same thing, whether you're using puppets or sand or whatever. You're trying to get inside that character's head and show them the internal thoughts of the character to the rest of the world. And I think that's it's been a lifelong pursuit and a lifelong passion of mine.
Do you still have time to draw, to do your flip books?
Yeah, I do. I do flip books at least once a year, and I have my drawing sketch. This one's from the Wolf Walkers. No, I love those guys, and so I've been using this to draw, and yeah, I think it's not only good just health wise, but it actually helps me see. And I suggest this for people who maybe are interested in writing or maybe don't see themselves as visual artists. Still, drawing helps you see better. It helps you really take in stuff. Like you might walk past a building 50 times, but if you stop and you draw it, you'll see stuff for the first time that you hadn't noticed before, you know, just because you have to sit there and put it all down. And I think it's a really great discipline.
Well, your flip books are legendary. I remember listening to Ed Catmull's presentation during our last VIEWConference, and he just kept going on and on about how you don't give people a card for Christmas. You give them a flip book, and how much he looks forward to that.
They're fun to do. They're always, it's the same every year. Where at the beginning, I'm like, maybe I just give up this year. I don't know. And then at the end, you're like, hey, this is fun. Yeah, so it takes a little while to build up steam.
I want to ask you now a question concerning the inspiration for Soul. Where did you get the idea for the story?
Funny enough, it factors into what we were just talking about. Having had a lifelong passion for animation, I think there was part of me that thought, if I just succeed, if I really make it and do well, then everything else in my life will come together and make sense. And so after working on Toy Story, Monsters, and Up, and then Inside Out, you know, it was such a rewarding film, not only in the fun that we had making it and a great crew, but then the way it was received by the world. You know, it did really well at the box office. We got good awards and things, and most rewarding, I think, people were telling me how this film gave them a new language, a new set of tools to be able to talk with their children or patients in the case of psychologists and things. So way beyond what I ever imagined was possible for myself. And yet, after all that, I found myself thinking, well, now what? Do I just do another movie? Like, why don't I feel like everything has been completed and fulfilled in my life? And it was really just starting to think about that, along with the sort of essence of who we are. I think because at the same time my son was going off to college, and I was looking at pictures of him as a baby and going, oh, look, you can still see who he is in there, you know, even when he was a little baby. he was kind of who he became. And I thought, well, I wonder if these are related. Like, are we born with a purpose? Are we born with a sense of, an inherent sense of who we are and a destiny? Or do we get to choose that? Or is there no such thing? It's all meaningless and arbitrary. So it was really a chance to kind of explore those ideas.
Why do you think animation is the ideal medium to tackle such complex questions, such philosophical questions?
I think it's such a freeing medium because you're not limited by, what's right in front of you. You can, of course, grab a hold of that, and I think the great animators are able to kind of take real life and turn the volume up and make, speak louder about who a person is, or basically a sense of caricature. Both the design and even the way those people are portrayed and the way they speak. I think animation does all that, but then that's just like the starting line. Then you can go even further. You can make up entire worlds. You can create metaphors that would be impossible to make in any other way. There is something, I think, that's like a good animated film is like a haiku, where it takes this incredible complexity of life and distills it down into just a few words, and I find that really beautiful and fascinating.
What would you want to be known for on Earth? We only have a short time on this planet. You want to become the person that you were born to be? Don't waste your time on all the junk of life.
What am I doing?
Spend your precious hours doing what will bring out the real you. The brilliant, passionate you that's ready to contribute something meaningful into this world. I got the gig. I really need a haircut today, man. Can you fit me in? Whoa, sorry. What the? Hello? So what do you want to be remembered for?
Probably for doing this funny cowboy dance.
Great.
In the film, you use two radically different styles, the abstract style for the before life and a different style for the quote unquote real world. Can you take me through the process of how you arrived at this very unique look and feel?
I think where we started was just trying to do research. And this is true of almost, every film I've worked on. And so in this film, we talked with priests and rabbis and experts in various world religions and tried to understand as much as we could about how do humans perceive the soul throughout time. And most of them had similar things to say, like a soul is invisible, it's non-physical, it's ethereal, it's vaporous, all these kind of words that were somewhat mysterious and hard to understand, like how are we going to draw that, because you can say a soul's non-physical, but what are you going to shoot, because if you can't point a camera at it, then we're going to have a problem. So we tried to evoke those words. We tried to design the characters and the surrounding world, the great before, in ways that suggested non-physical. In other words, they're very foggy and soft and rounded and simplified, like, all the complexity taken out so that they're almost like, one of our designers said that the souls were meant to be like a corporate logo for a company of the person. So they're like this very simplified version of the person. On the other hand, then, when we went to the real world, we wanted to oppose that. We wanted texture and detail and hard edges and solidity and things that were so different. And so I think, like a lot of times, this seems to happen, that once you have these two ideas, they end up defining each other in opposition, you know? Same thing happened for the first version of Monsters, Inc. We didn't have Mike Wazowski, the guy that he hung around with. It was just Sully. But once, and we didn't know really who he was as a character. But once we had Mike, then by opposition, we understood more who Sully was. And I think that's true of a lot of ideas in storytelling and filmmaking.
Can you talk to me about the music? Because also for the music, as for the visual style, you have two different styles. Can you elaborate more about those musical choices and how you arrived at that?
I would credit our editor, Kevin Nolting. He, from the beginning, was starting to use well, we sort of dismissively called it spa music at the beginning. Right? It's music that you'd hear when you go to get a massage somewhere. You know, it's very like soft and lilting. And then by contrast, we thought, what if we can just use needle drop, existing jazz music for all the real world stuff. So you have, again, this very, just like the design of the space, in the design of the sound, you have these very opposing ideas. Of course, jazz is very rhythmic and crisp. You know, it can be a lot of things, but that's where we went with it. So it was there, kind of in the first blueprints, if you will, of the story, and we thought, well, let's see if we can make that work. We need somebody who can give us real, authentic jazz. And our first thought was, when we met John Batiste, he's going to be perfect. We thought maybe he could give us his versions of these standards, you know, so existing tunes. He ended up writing all original music, almost all. There's a couple of tunes that the band is playing that were by other people, but he wrote his own versions of stuff that he felt would fit better. On the other side, then we had Trent and Atticus, who, of course, you wouldn't really think of Nine Inch Nails or Gone Girl or any of those kind of movies as being really fitting well with Pixar, but that was the excitement of it. And they worked very differently than anybody I'd worked with before, Randy or Michael. So it took some stretching. It took, I think, us being, we had to be a little flexible from the way we're used to working. And I think they knew, they were very smart, of course, at the beginning, realizing, okay, we're going to have to develop some new tones, a new approach to our music because of what's required in the story and the audience and all of that. So the music was, of course, a huge part of the film, and I think everybody did a fantastic job, and it fits so perfectly with what the story is about.
Can you talk a little bit about the sequence in the movie, the Epiphanistic Sequence, when he's at the piano and he plays and he pulls out the objects from his pocket? What does that mean? What is the significance of all that?
Well, to me, that was kind of what I would say is the emotional punchline of the film. And by that, I mean, here's a guy who feels like, I was born to play music, I was born to perform. And when he finally gets that after a long struggle, he doesn't feel as though the world, everything, you know, like my own story, he was expecting things to just fall into place. And now everything is okay. And instead he finds, wait a minute, I'm still the same guy. I still live in the same crappy apartment and have to take the subway and all the things that I didn't really like about my life before. And so this scene is Joe re-examining his own life. You know, he literally takes the sheet music that he was trying to kind of, his plan for his life, and he puts that aside and grabs this stuff that he thought was just junk and puts it along the piano and plays his life. And so I felt like, even though we didn't have all of the details worked out from the beginning, it did feel intriguing that Joe, as a character, would find a deeper meaning and connection with the world through his art, through his music. And so using the piano in that way was really exciting, and it was something we locked in on pretty early in the script development, before we knew like what exactly those objects were. You know, the lollipop representing the barber shop, and all the details we worked out along the way. But we had the basic idea of Joe understanding that he needs to look at life from a different angle. That was there from pretty early on.
Beautiful. I mean, it's really such a climax in the movie. I mean, you really feel the movie as an experience through the beautiful music, and it's very emotional.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, and that was a fun time for Trent and Atticus and John Batiste, who, as I mentioned, are kind of at opposite ends of the spectrum. They worked together on that cue. John played, well, it was written by Trent, and then John kind of performed his version of it, and then it transitioned into their music. And that was, I think, it worked really well for us storytelling-wise as well, because you have these two different ideas that seem very much in opposition, and now they're merging and blending.
I'd like to ask you, which is your favorite sequence, and why?
Well, you already stole my answer, so I'll pick a different one. I like one of my favorite scenes is right when Joe falls into the manhole, and the next scene, and it's still kind of hurts that, you know, the film was not able to be seen in a theater with a lot of audiences, but I did see it with enough crowds to know that it's really fun, because the audience feels like, okay, I know where this is going. There's this guy, he's a jazz musician, he just got his gig, and wait a minute, what's going on? Where are we now? It's really disorienting to people in a fun way. And so that scene where he's on the slidewalk heading towards the bright light and figuring out, wait a second, I don't want to die. I don't want to, that was a really fun one to do, and it's really fun to experience with an audience.
In your view, what makes soul particularly relevant to today's audiences?
Well, you know, it's interesting. A lot of folks have said, wow, this film came out at the perfect time, because it really speaks to where we are in the pandemic and in the world and where things are today. Of course, we wrote it essentially. We had the essence of the idea 4 years ago, so we had no idea. I do feel like the kind of questions that we were able to explore in the film are pretty universal. You go back to the ancient Greeks, and people are talking about, am I born with a purpose? Do I have destiny? Is there such a thing as fate? You know, these are questions that I think maybe we don't ask every day, but we do all ask ourselves those kind of things. What am I meant to be doing with the time that I have? And I think this year, being stuck at home and all the great pleasures of life that we have come to kind of expect, you know, we realize, wait, there's no guarantees. You know, everything is a gift, and I really need to be thinking more deeply about what is it that I am doing with my life, and how am I using my time. All those things, I think, turned out to be very especially poignant or relevant this year. And yeah, those are things we got to play with in the making of this film.
After so much experience in animation, what was new, what was surprising, and what was totally shocking about directing Soul?
The new thing, this is something I haven't really talked a whole lot about, so I hope it'll make sense. I felt like, looking back at all of Pixar films, at the core of all of them are relationships, right? So you have characters that usually are stuck together and struggle with each other and come to understand each other at some deeper moment. And that's usually the transformative thing that happens to our main character. And the thing that that we set out to do at the beginning of this was to say, let's see, can we make people emotional? Can we affect people if it's just a man's struggle with where he fits in the world? So the punchline, the scene we were talking about a minute ago of Joe playing his life, is not really about another character. It's about Joe and his understanding of how he fits into the universe. And so that was something that was pretty challenging, pretty big. I think that was, we were not sure we would be able to pull it off for a long time. There were plenty of screenings where people went like, I'm not really feeling that, So that was a big challenge. I think that the things that were the most shocking were obviously the pandemic and the change and the fact that we were able to finish the film not all being in the same building. Of course, a lot of people, I think, have a production experience working with people around from different parts of the world. But that was kind of new for us. It was pretty stunning how quickly people adapted. They were up and running within a couple days. We were having animation dailies and reviews and all the things that we always did back at work, but now at home. And I think it's a real testament both to the advanced planning, especially of our technical folks, but also the adaptability of humans. We're pretty resilient, and we're pretty, I think, beyond where we give ourselves credit for. You kind of feel like, well, unless I have this, I can't do it. And you realize, well, sometimes you don't get to control all that stuff, and most often you can still do it.
Art is often about creating a singular vision, yet filmmaking is a collaborative process. How do you fit these two things together?
It's a really good question. I feel like my misperception at the beginning was that the director's job is to have the vision in their head, and then my job was just to make everybody else know exactly what they need to do. And I think really a stronger director is able to employ the amazing talents of all the people around him or her. So instead of saying, make it red, and with a lot of spiky, jaggedy lines or whatever, if I can speak more generally about the emotional effect that something needs to have on the audience, then I suddenly open up other people's brains to bring forward all their ideas. And so if that makes sense, the film is constantly growing. So it's starting with my or just a small group of people's idea and vision of what it is. And then every new person we bring in, the film expands and it becomes bigger and it becomes richer. And my job then as the director is to make sure that we're all heading the right way, that we're not making like 5 different versions of the film, or that we're not accidentally saying the wrong thing. Because of course, every element of the movie, from sound to visuals to movement, all of those are employed with a specific purpose, and they say something to the audience, right? So the director's really there to say, okay, emotionally, I'm getting a little bit more nervousness here, and what I need is excitement. So how can we adjust that, whether, again, through the movement or the music or whatever?
Who are your mentors? Who are the people who have been influential in your life? Who are your storytelling heroes?
Well, there's a long list. I feel like some of them I barely met. Like I feel like I was, well, first of all, my parents, of course. They were very encouraging and
oh, sweet.
Encouraged me to bring myself out in ways that I probably wouldn't have if it weren't for them. I do feel like I learned a lot from people I just admired, like Charles Schulz, who did Peanuts, and Jim Henson, and the Muppets, and a lot of the things that they found important and a style of entertainment that they had. I made it into my own work. And then, I was lucky to meet other heroes like Joe Grant, who was, if you're not familiar with the name, he was one of the guys who came up with the story for Dumbo and picked the music for Fantasia. And I was lucky enough to meet him. He was in his 90s. And I would meet with him, once a month or so. And he just always had such profoundly big ideas for his own work and things that I would walk away with. So that's a short list.
What advice and what words of encouragement would you have for young filmmakers out there who dream of becoming directors and animators?
Well, two things. One, I would say, do it, right? It's easier than ever. You grab your iPhone and you can start right now making movies. I think there is a misperception that people are sort of either born talented or not. And there's maybe a little of that, but I think a lot of it is like you wouldn't expect somebody to sit at a piano who's never played and be like, all right, go to Carnegie Hall, you're playing tonight. You're like, what? You have to practice. And filmmaking is no different. The more you practice, the better you get, the more facile, more tools you have at your disposal, and the more your eyes open to seeing the great work of other people. So that's the first thing. And then the second I would say is that no matter where you are, if you can find ways to enjoy what you're doing today, as opposed to saying, boy, I'm miserable now, but as soon as I get here, that's no way to live. You know, you want to find some joy and fulfillment in whatever it is you're doing. And if you can't, then that's a problem. And maybe you're on the wrong path.
Wow. Thank you. Well, from someone who exudes joy and passion for what he does, thank you for those beautiful words. I do hope that sometime soon we'll be able to have you in Italy at the VIEW conference.
That would be fantastic.
Attending the event.
Can we just redo this whole year? Let's go back, and then next year we'll have the conference, and then we could get everybody to come there. Tom and Glenn Keane and everybody. It'd be great, wouldn't it?
The whole gang. Well,
let's do it.
Thank you so much, and have a great day.
All right, you too. That was fun.